Many Star Wars fans' first glimpse of the planet Onderon came in Star Wars The Clone Wars at the start of the show's 5th season. The Clone Wars Onderon arc was about the Republic covertly training Onderonian freedom fighters to battle the Separatists, who controlled Onderon through a puppet king. The arc presented this battle as a textbook clash of good and evil, but this battle held a secret. Both of Onderon's kings, loyalist and separatist alike, were heirs to a terrible legacy, and by supporting one of them, those Republic-backed rebels were unknowingly fighting for a dynasty of the ancient Sith.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Onderon was an inner rim world with a long history, stretching back nearly 5,000 years before the Clone Wars. In the distant past, it was settled by a small band of humans whose ship crashed in the planet's dense jungles. The jungles were treacherous and chock full of all manner of deadly beasts, whose numbers were regularly replenished by Onderon's so-called demon moon, Duxon. Duxon was also a jungle world, and its forests were even more treacherous. About once a month, it passed so close to Onderon that the atmospheres of the two worlds merged, allowing monsters from Duxon to fly to Onderon to hunt. Faced with these oppressive conditions, the settlers of Onderon banded together to form the city of Iziz, a great fortress city in the heart of the jungle. By the time of the Clone Wars, Iziz was still the only major city on Onderon, though the jungles had been rendered less dangerous by millennia of hunting. Onderon had changed greatly during its time in the Republic, but Iziz retained many ancient traditions, among them the institution of the monarchy. At the start of the Separatist crisis, King Ramses Dendeb ruled the planet. Dendeb favoured neither the Republic nor the CIS and tried to keep Onderon neutral. This ultimately saw him kicked from his throne. He was replaced by Sanjay Rash, a separatist and close ally of Count Dooku who brought Onderon into the Confederacy. However, Dendeb still had supporters. A group of rebels led by the Guerrera siblings formed out in the jungle and began a campaign of guerrilla warfare against Rash's regime, receiving Republic assistance in early 20 BBY. The rebels quickly grew in popularity, especially after they rescued Dendeb from captivity, and civil war broke out on Iziz, with groups of loyalists picking fights with the local droid garrison. Rash was ultimately overthrown and Dendeb reclaimed his throne. Believe it or not, this wasn't the first time that something like this had happened on Onderon. 4,000 years before the Clone Wars, Dendeb's ancestor, Queen Talia, faced a similar situation. Talia ruled Onderon during an even darker chapter of the galaxy's history, the Old Sith Wars. She also led the people of Iziz through the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War. In the former conflict, the Mandalorians occupied Onderon and fought a fierce battle against the natives, while the Second War left the planet mostly untouched. It was in the years after the Jedi Civil War that Talia began to have problems. In 3951 BBY, 5 years after the end of the last war, Onderon suffered its own civil war. Since Onderon was one of the few planets in the Republic to have escaped the destruction of the Jedi Civil War, the Senate began relying on Queen Talia in the post-war period. Goods entering and exiting Iziz were taxed heavily to generate revenue, and flora and fauna from Onderon's jungles were used to seed new ecosystems on devastated worlds. Talia allowed the Republic to take what it needed, believing that if Onderon could help the rest of the galaxy, it should. But many Onderonians took issue with this. As the Republic became increasingly unpopular all over the Rim, Talia lost favour in Iziz, as she'd brought Onderon into the Republic and remained a staunch supporter. Talia's most outspoken critic was one of her cousins, General Vaklu, the leader of Onderon's military. Vaklu wanted Onderon to secede from the Republic and close itself off from the galaxy, believing that Iziz had to keep its prosperity to itself if it wanted to retain its identity and prestige. Many Onderonians agreed with him, and soon enough, many were calling for Talia to step down and appoint Vaklu as the new king. As support for this change in leadership grew, Vaklu and his second-in-command, Colonel Tobin, began planning a coup. At first, a coup against Talia seemed unlikely. Most of the military was loyal to her over Vaklu. Unbeknownst to most Onderonians, however, Vaklu and Tobin had a powerful ally. Darth Nihilus. The Lord of Hunger had taken interest in Onderon, pledging his support to Vaklu's cause. As Vaklu used his position to cut off space traffic to and from Iziz, some of Nihilus's followers set up camp in a tomb on Duxon. When the time came, they used the dark side energies of the tomb to amplify the power of a ritual that drove the beasts of Onderon mad with terror. Many of these beasts had been caged in preparation for transport off-world, only for them to break out and wreak havoc all over Iziz, allowing Vaklu to make his move. Civil war consumed Iziz, and large swaths of the city were destroyed as royalist troops battled Vaklu's soldiers. The royalists had the advantage of numbers, but Vaklu had the elements of surprise as well as Sith reinforcements. This allowed his forces to breach the royal palace itself, where they cornered Talia in the throne room. Vaklu would have won the day if it weren't for the intervention of Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, who fought her way through the throne room and helped Talia defeat Vaklu. The Onderon Civil War of 3951 BBY was brief but devastating. It took years for Iziz to rebuild and for tensions to fully cool. But Talia's reign was long, and in the end, she did well by her people. Under her rule, Onderon remained part of the Republic and escaped the clutches of Darth Nihilus. However, just because Vaklu was defeated didn't mean the planet was free of Sith influence. During the Onderon Civil War, Nihilus's troops used the dark side taint of a tomb on Duxon to drive the beasts and Iziz mad. That tomb was the last monument to a dark part of Onderon's history, which most in Iziz preferred to leave forgotten: the reign of Freedon Nad. Freedon Nad was an ancient Dark Lord of the Sith, a fallen Jedi who'd apprenticed himself to Naga Sadow. He conquered Onderon when Iziz was only a few centuries old and proclaimed himself king. Nad ruled Iziz with an iron fist, banishing all who opposed him into the jungles, where most of them died painful deaths. Some of these exiles, however, learned to tame the beasts of the jungle, becoming the Beast Riders. The Beast Riders formed their own satellite civilization and routinely raided Iziz, hoping to free the city from Nad's tyranny. But Freedon Nad was too powerful for the Beast Riders to overthrow. He corrupted Iziz itself, inducting most of the population into a dark side cult. Onderon became a tainted world. After Nad's death, the throne of Iziz passed to one of his children. For centuries, the descendants of Nad ruled Iziz, all of them students of the dark side. This trend continued until 4000 BBY, when Princess Gallia, Queen Talia's mother, defected to the Beast Riders. Gallia married Oron Kira, a Beast Rider prince, and with the help of the Jedi, they overthrew Queen Aminoa and King Omin. A civil war with the Narratists ensued, but in the end, Nad's supporters were defeated. Bodies of Freedon Nad, Queen Aminoa, and King Omin were interred in the Duxon tomb, where the Jedi hoped they would be unable to corrupt Onderon any further. But the Jedi underestimated the power of Duxon. The Daemonoon was alive with the dark side, and the tomb of Freedon Nad only strengthened this sinister taint. Both literally and figuratively, Duxon cast a shadow over Onderon, subtly influencing the planet below. As we discussed earlier, later generations of Sith used the power of the tomb to drive the beasts of Iziz mad. With that in mind, it's possible that the ever-present shadow of Duxon was the reason why Onderon was so prone to war. Even if that wasn't the case though, the bloodline of Freedon Nad lived on. The royal line was directly descended from him, through Gallia and Talia all the way to Ramses Dendam. By the time of the Clone Wars, Freedon Nad had been gone for thousands of years, but his legacy endured. Ironically, this meant that the Jedi helped put the heir of a Sith Lord back on the throne of Iziz. So that's why Onderon was so messed up. But what do you think? Would you like to see more content on the history of Onderon? There's plenty more to be said about Freedon Nad, the Beast Wars, and the Civil War if you're interested. So be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.